Welcome everyone to Chart's free webinar. Today we welcome Kaylee Skinner and Michelle Sullivan, who are going to be speaking on how Biscuitville delivers value from digital learning. Welcome, Michelle and Kelly.
Thank you, Tara. Well, I'm excited to, as Skooks, to present Biscuitville and Kaylee. They are a valued client of ours, and they're going to talk a lot about what they've done to update their whole digital learning program. So if we want to jump ahead, we'll do a few introductions and then we'll get started. So I'm Michelle Sullivan. I am the VP of Marketing Communications here at Skooks. And if you aren't familiar with Skooks, we are a learning and talent development platform vendor. We've been around since 2012, are headquartered in the US and have offices in Canada and Greece as well. And our whole platform is built with the frontline in mind and works hard to connect learning with development, because what is learning if you don't take what you've learned and create it into your daily flow of work? I am happy to introduce our valued client, Kaylee, with Biscuitville Fresh Southern. And Kaylee and I first met at the DevLearn conference last year, and we talked a lot about what her organization has done, and we've talked about it a bunch of times this year. So I'm so excited to finally get to share with you all the things that they are doing to improve their learning and development program. Kaylee, tell us a little bit about your org.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Michelle. And it has been an incredible journey just in the last year. So we are a family-owned company that's very regional. So we're in 3 states, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia, with about 85 locations. And we're in the quick service industry, so that very small area that we do take up. We have a very loyal brand, and being able to go into Skooks and being able to leverage their platform has just completely changed how we've approached training and how we've used training in the field.
Excellent. Well, when Kaylee and I were introduced by a colleague of mine, I said, you had me at Biscuit. So let's keep moving forward, and I want to make sure that we have enough time to share with everyone all the cool things that your team is already implemented and what you're looking to do moving forward. So I won't waste a lot of time talking too much about Skooks. As I mentioned, we were formed in 2012. We are well known in the industry for our high satisfaction rate from our customers, everything from the implementation and onboarding process throughout the client's journey using our platform. We've got over 3,000 client organizations and 20 million learners worldwide, and we're in 32 languages. But today we're just going to talk the language of Biscuit and learning. So Kaylee, let's move on to the next slide. And I just want to talk a little bit about our love of the front line. So we feel that high turnover industries are so challenged today and doing all that they can to develop their workforce. We've done a lot of studies around this topic, and certainly the onboarding process is very critical. Workers need to feel that they know what they are doing, and they're 3 times more likely to stay when they're supported well and understand the job. And those who plan to stay, those are the ones that say that they know what's expected of them and that they want to get it right. And they also are always desiring of more training. And, these are some of the biggest challenges that have been reported. Kaylee, are these some of the challenges that you're seeing in your organization as well?
Absolutely. Many of them.
Yes. And I think, this does extend not just in, quick serve restaurants, but any service organization, anyone who's dealing with the public or with a customer who's an end user, whether it's in person or on the phone. So let's keep going. And before we jump into it too much, we did want to ask everybody a quick poll question. just to get a feel for everyone and what you're seeing out there in your own organizations. So I'm going to type it in here. We want to know, how involved is your frontline when it comes to your learning and development programs? So you who are out there in the audience, are you seeing zero involvement from your frontline? Are they just aware that there's learning available? Are they involved in creation and delivery? Because we have some customers who allow employees to film TikToks where they're sharing how they've learned how to make menu items or work equipment. And then do you have some learners who are on the front line who are real champions? Or is there anything else going on that you just want to share with Kaylee and I? Okay, so it looks like a lot of folks are in the B category. So that's great that people are at least aware of what's being provided. And, you know, one of the things we'll talk about today is how you can get them more involved in the process. Kaylee, what would your answer be in your organization? How involved is everyone in the front line in your L&D?
I think currently right now, we have some Bs, but we also have some that are Ds. Just kind of depends on how they've embraced training.
True. Well, if we can jump on to the next slide, I just have one more thing I want to share before we jump into the Biscuitville story. So, you know, we feel that at Skooks, and a lot of our clients feel that it's really important for learners to be involved. Certainly nearly half of employers, they want to deliver training to frontline workers in a classroom with an instructor. However, a lot want to just use a computer or a kiosk. However, 91% of frontline workers, they want access on a mobile device. They are usually the ones who will have their mobile device in their pocket. When they need to know something, they just want to pull it out and go right to it. So there's certainly been a shift that I've seen from my very long time in this market, longer than I want to admit. But it's certainly, you know, something that everyone needs to answer the call of the mobile. So going to let Kaylee take over and share a little bit about how her organization is meeting the needs of their learners and what they've been doing, particularly over the last year, to really make an impact on their organization and help their frontline workers be the best that they can be. So Kaylee, without further ado from me, please take it away.
All right. Well, first, I want to thank Chart and Skooks for putting this together. So we are going to get just kind of straight into who we are as Biscuitville. So did say we're very regional. So just kind of some background about us before we get into training. So Biscuitville was actually established in 1966. We originally started as Pizzaville, so we served pizzas. And then we took a turn and started doing biscuits. We are family owned. So the current family, our current president that we have right now, he is the son of the original founder. So we are still very family run. We have a lot of the family still involved in the business. What our main focus is on is locally sourced ingredients. So we go with a lot of very local areas, trying to use fresh ingredients, family owned businesses. A lot of times it's stuff that we can actually pick up and bring back with us. And we also do a biscuit window, which is a trademarked item. So people can actually watch us make biscuits, and we have those fresh every 15 minutes. We have 84 locations. We have a few in Virginia. Most of our locations are in North Carolina, and we have about 8 in South Carolina. Right now, we're looking at an 8 to 10% growth yearly. We've started pushing more into South Carolina and then more towards the coast. And you can kind of see where we're located on that map there. One of the things that really draws people to us, but is also a really big issue with training, is we do life after 2. So because we are Biscuitville, it's very breakfast. So you don't have a biscuit for dinner. It's more of a breakfast food, and you can kind of see one of our sandwiches right there. We are very focused on breakfast, and so we actually close at 2 o'clock every day. So we're usually open 5 to 2, 5:30 to 2. So all of our employees are off by at least 2. This also means that everyone's off at 2, so all of our training has to happen in a very compressed window. It makes it very difficult to make sure that everyone does get done. So we do have to be aware of that. We also own our own distribution center. So we have since conception, and it is great for us because we don't have to worry about some of the other issues. But we also have to make sure that our own distribution center is trained correctly, is able to do things correctly. So that also adds another layer of training that we have to be able to provide. And they also do all the deliveries as well. We are able to save and have some sort of return because they will actually do backhauling and bring things back. So we go past Mount Olive and they will actually bring back pickles. We currently have over 2,000 employees. We're leaning almost into 2,300. So we are a very fast growing business. So we talked a little bit about challenges. When I joined Biscuitville 3 years ago, it was a very different atmosphere than what we currently have. And the training was not as it is today. So before I showed up here, there was actually no formal training and there was no online training. So what ended up happening is that they were training with tribal knowledge. So an employee would get hired, they would go to a position, and they would learn from somebody else. That created a lot of issues because now there was no standards, and how one store would do something would be different from another store. And it created a lot of problems. It created a lot of variance in what we saw from food, as well as safety and health issues. When it came to management, we also saw that there was no manager training oversight. What was what they were actually doing was creating a notebook that was printed. As soon as you printed it, it was out of date training. The material wasn't relevant anymore. No one was actually paying attention to that notebook. There was no process of turning it in. Everyone just kind of did it, and once you did it, you were promoted. There also was no budget for training, so stores were expected to just kind of train the people. So they put them in the station because they were being charged for that labor, so they were just there. We didn't have any clarity on how a team member moved from a shift manager to an assistant manager, what kind of process that needed to be. Really clear about what expectations they had, what new skills they needed to have, what development did they need. The little bit of online training we did have, we did through our time management system, and it was very difficult for us to use, and it had very low completion rates. So this was only used for our LCO trainings that we offered 4 times a year. And the completion rates would be 20 to 30%, very low if we were able to get that high. It also was very time consuming for us to do. The first time that we were trying to put it on, when I took over the position, it took me almost 4 hours to actually get it to work correctly. And I told my boss that I never wanted to do that again. And Scoops is nothing like that. And the first time I uploaded something into Scoops, I was so happy. And also the reporting in our time management system for completions was impossible for the managers to run and almost as impossible for us to run at our support center. So just knowing all those issues that we were having, it was a big ask. We also knew that we were putting all of our training material in Dropbox, and we were actually having people in the field that were deleting files, changing files, moving files. So there was a constant need for us to try to find things, to re-upload things, even though they were told not to move things, to just be able to access things. Our training was only in English. We do have several stores where a lot of the employees speak Spanish, so we did not actually have anything for them to learn. And then we also had, because Dropbox was open for everyone at the support center, a problem with version control. So we had multiple documents, same thing, but different versions running out in the field. So we would have issues of someone using a document that was 4 years old, and we had already moved on. So it was hard for us to hold people to standards because they were using something that was previously already considered outdated. So the first thing that we did is we actually essentially used the ADDIE model to develop what our project timeline was going to be. And this was actually a 3-year project. So the very first thing we actually had to do is figure out, what did people need and what do they currently not like? So we spent 6 months doing surveys, and it was very interesting to hear what people had to say about our current training, our current LMS that we were using. We did over 230 surveys. So we actually went into the restaurants and asked employees, and it wasn't just managers, hourly workers, we did our drivers, we did everybody that we could at every level. So when we went and asked the 230, we asked them various questions, and you can see the different areas that we asked questions in, and we put it in a pain point chart. So with this pain point chart, what we're looking at is saying, on a scale of 1 to 5, how painful is it? And obviously you want to be closer to 0. So we do have quite a bit of pain. And the most painful is the auditing system. So that's actually being able to audit, do checklists and things like that. At this time, we were still using Redbook, still paper and pencil, which most of our stuff was still paper and pencil. And that was our highest at a 2.23. Our average pain was a 1.6. The other thing that we did during this time is we actually asked them for verbatim. So they would give us comments and we would type them down exactly how they said it. And then we did a keyword search. So we would find keywords of pain throughout. We ended up getting 193 negative comments about our LMS that we were using that's not really an LMS. We had 169 negative references to ongoing development, 167 about tools and research sources, and then 163 about just training in general. So we knew exactly where we needed to focus on. So from there, the next step was figuring out, what is everyone else doing? Because we had to go from paper and pencil to now going digital. So we ended up doing competitor studies. So we worked with a lot of different competitors and actually asked them, what are you guys using? And how do you use it? Can we take a look? We're not going to steal anything. But knowing that a lot of the people in our departments are also part of other brands, or they came from other brands and still have connections, we went to a couple different companies that are still our friends, and we still talk to some of them. And there's actually 6 different companies that we talked to and asked them, how do you use it? What does it look like? How long does it take from when someone's hired to their certification? What all are you doing? Just for us to understand, so we could figure out what a training program looks like for them. Once that 6 months was done, we moved into our next one. And then this is where we met Skooks. So we had 6 months to figure out and decide what our LMS was going to be. So we actually started with 16 vendors, and we were able to narrow it down. We knew exactly what we were looking for. We really put Skooks through the ringer. This is really when I started to step in, and I had conversations with a couple of the people at Skooks multiple times, just to kind of talk through the user friendliness and the ability to do stuff. We ended up using a lot of the data from that employee survey to say, this has to be in our new LMS. Part of that was the resource library. So having access to tools and resources So like Michelle said, people want to have it on their mobile phone. They want it right now. That was a really big ask because until then, everything was in Dropbox and it was moved and no one could find it. And it was all over the place. They also wanted an auditing system to be able to figure out what are the training completion rates. And they wanted to have tools and resources for employees to be able to do their job and do it well. We knew that it needed to be easy to navigate, and it needed to be easy for us to update and also maintain control of the version so that everything was correct and there weren't multiple versions running around. So we actually spent about 2 months in Skooks' sandbox. I ended up creating, I think, an entire course in there. And we actually still have the sandbox today, which is great because if I want to try to mess up something, I go in there so we don't mess up our real site.
And
So after,
Kaylee, before you move on to the next slide,
yes,
I just want to compliment your team. It's always impressed me ever since I first got to know you guys, the level of even, you know, going out to the market, the pre-work that you all did and the research and the surveys, you know, for an organization also that's scaled at the size of your business and the, you know, your locations and your number of employees, what you did was actually at an enterprise level. And I've really only seen this level of work with some of our clients that are global, that have, you know, hundreds of thousands of employees. So just always have wanted to commend you all for all this work, because often this is something where it seems like just someone jumps in overnight and they don't really step back and take a look at what is the current situation.
we also surprise a lot of people when it's known that in training, it's usually just myself and Aku, my boss. So it's usually just the two of us that are considering training. We do have Nathan, who's also comes into that, and other various people that supported this project. But it's not like we have, you know, 10, 12, 15 people on the team. So when we talk about actually implementing, it's less than 10 that actually did the process. So it's pretty amazing how much we were able to get done. So once we determined that we were going with Skooks, and we signed everything with Scott, that's when we realized and we needed to start figuring out what needed to be in there. So we gave ourselves 1 year to essentially go from nothing to having everything done. And so this was a big ask, and I turned into a hermit during this time. But we were going to create and test all of the content. So from when somebody was hired to when they became an area manager, everything that they needed in between. In order to do this, Skooks was really great. We had an amazing implementation specialist, Nathan. We had a Skooks Nathan because we have a Biscuitville Nathan. And he was really great working with us and helping us and leveraging different tools and showing us how different things worked. We also use Articulate 360 Beyond, and we also use SmartCat for translation because we wanted everything to be both in English and in Spanish. Once we had gotten all of the hourly content written, so being able to certify in one position, we actually went ahead and decided to test in one restaurant. We wanted to see how the content worked and what was working and what wasn't before we finished all the manager material, because that was going to be a heavier piece. So before we got all the way done and realized, oh, wait, that doesn't really work, we wanted to test it. So what we ended up doing was going to one restaurant, and we actually had them all certify in one position. So it ended up being 2 courses, a lot of lessons that they were doing. We did weekly meetings there. So we had a meeting with the management team. We also had trainings with the management teams. What we ended up doing was actually myself and a few others, we would go and actually work in the positions. So one of the great things about being in training is that we can actually all work in a store and make biscuits and be cooks, and it is fun going back and working. But we would actually take over a position for a team member so they could actually step off and train, because we don't have training hours built in at this point. So we helped with their labor to allow them to step off to train. And then after that, we asked them a ton of questions for feedback. How did it work? What flowed? What didn't flow? What made sense? And they were so great at letting us know what was great, what wasn't. From there, we gave ourselves 1 month to be able to make any changes, any updates before we were going to go ahead and move forward. So during the design phase, we knew we were going to have to do a lot of really detailed planning. So once we had all the positions done, that's when we were going to be moving into management. So we really needed to focus on how that was going to look, because up until this point, being able to move up into management looked very different. So previously, before Skooks, the only career path or what people knew was available was this graphic that they would see during orientation, and that would be it. So they would see kind of the job responsibilities, they would see the different roles, but there was no clear indication on how to move up. So what we did is we had done all the crew, which was that bottom level, but now we needed to do everything above it. So once we had that 1 month to fix everything, now we had all of those heavier positions to get done. So we knew we needed to get working. We determined that we are going to really hit those hard, and we gave ourselves 6 months to get all of that done at that point. We ended up spending a lot of time really focusing even before we were writing crew, to really focus on what we were going to do. So from day 1 to their last day with us, what all did that need to look like? So we create courses and lessons. Skooks calls it something different, but we changed the name, which always is fun when we're trying to change things on them. But we created courses and lessons, and we built a course out for every position, and then broke it up into lessons to cover smaller topics. And then from a lesson, they had micro learning, so small pieces to do different activities. We knew we wanted a variety of activities in there so they could interact with it, and it wasn't just read this, read this, read this. We also wanted them to be able to move through the training at their own pace. So if they could go faster, great. If they need more time, they could take more time. So what we ended up doing was creating a career path matrix, and this has been amazing for us. So before we wrote anything, this was entirely done all the way through. And now that we're writing content for our support center and other areas, we're actually creating and developing another career path matrix. So this is our career path matrix. We built it out for every position. This is actually one of the lessons. So this is our area director course. So our position for area director. And this is our lesson for public speaking. What we ended up doing is having someone was responsible for the content writing. So in this case, I was responsible for creating the content, which was very common. And then under notes was exactly what we expected to see in that section. So instead of trying to figure out what it might possibly cover, we spent hours brainstorming and having sessions where we talked about, well, I think this should be in there, or we really need to make sure it captures this. This was really helpful when we were in the hourly content to make sure that we were covering all of our standards and making sure that every single thing that needed to be covered in the restaurant was somewhere. Underneath that, in the other notes, you can see all of our smaller micro learning steps. After the notes, you have status. So we actually did real-time status. So as you were completing something, you were updating the status so everyone could see where you were. And we actually had due dates, which was great for keeping people on track, especially myself. We also had prerequisites. So if they had to complete something before, they could actually get in here. And so in this case, the area director actually did have prerequisites. They had to complete the store manager course before they could go into this. So knowing that there was a sequential order, that also helped to make sure things stayed in order. And then we had lead and lag KPIs. So what are these going to affect? Essentially, what return on investment would this be going to? So it really spent, I think we had spent like 4 or 5 days just really brainstorming and sketching everything out. And when we did this, we ended up finding out a lot of things. One, we needed a lot of material that we didn't already have. 2, we knew exactly what we wanted everywhere. And then 3, we actually saw how heavy the lift was. And so what ended up happening was we had people that were simultaneously gathering material, creating standards for things that maybe didn't have a standard or didn't have a policy written in place before, and then creating the actual content at the same time. It was a big undertaking when you actually look at the entire career path matrix, but it ended up being the best way to keep everything organized and to know we covered everything. We didn't forget a step. We didn't forget a piece of what people needed to know, and that everything was in there. So we're currently still adding to this and continuing on. And it's a living, breathing document that is growing longer. So once we did our 1 store rollout, so our career path matrix was all filled out. We had done the first positions, made those changes, went back and did all of the management. We then went ahead and did an area rollout. So now we had all the training up through our area managers. So we knew we were going to roll out to just 1 single area, which is about 8 locations for us. And we also were going to stop doing what we were doing before for training, and any new restaurants we were opening, we're also going to start using Scoops. So that way we weren't going to have to play catch up with them, because in 6 months, everyone was going to be on Scoops anyways. During this area rollout, we determined that we were going to be providing a labor credit, which is something that they had not had before. They also had all of us there to support them. So we were going out and going to stores and doing visits. We were doing meetings with them. We were also out there providing training and whatever they needed. So usually we were in contact with them pretty regularly, doing weekly emails and weekly reporting. Once the area rollout was done and we got feedback again, we actually did our post survey so we could see what was happening, because at this point we had 12 to 15 stores in Skooks. So we had a fair amount that had been in Skooks and had been for a little while. Then we also moved into the company rollout. So we still had a lot of stores that needed to get into Skooks. We're about 60 stores at this point. So we still had about 45, 47 stores that needed to be in there. A couple of areas. So we determined that for the company-wide rollout, 1 person from our department was going to support each area, which made it easier for them to have 1 point of contact to come to, 1 person for them to talk to, instead of them trying to figure out who they could talk to. It was a lot easier in knowing, hey, this person's going to come to me if they have questions, or this person's going to go to Aku if they have questions. The stores started with the store manager and then they worked their way down. We did this intentionally so that the store manager knew what was in the content and knew how to navigate through. Because if they don't know how to do it, it's very hard for them to help their employees. Each team member, each hourly team member had to certify in at least one position. A lot of our team members are cross-trained, but we said just learn one and then we can go from there. And again, we offered a labor credit. We had our support, we did reporting, we were at meetings, we did whatever they needed us to do. They had about 6 months to go ahead and do this as well. One of the really cool things that we saw was that at this point, when we were going to the company rollout, we had several stores that had already started before we had even said anything. They had jumped onto the system. They had asked for permission. Some of them asked for forgiveness afterwards because we had one set password, so everyone knew what the password was. But we had a lot of stores that were already halfway done by the time it was the company rollout, and they were following the expectations, so we didn't say anything. So there was a lot of hype about training and a lot of desire for it. So when we talk about, are we a B or a D? That's why sometimes we're both. So again, after we had done our area rollout, we had it in several stores, we went ahead and we redid our pain chart. We asked very similar questions. They had to be a little bit different because we had changed some of our content. It was completely different results. The average was a 1.6 before, and now it was a 0.137, which is a change of 914%. It was completely flipped. People were now, they were having a hard time telling us what was that. It was very hard for them to tell us like, oh, training is awful, because for most of them, they knew what it was before. But even people that were coming from other concepts were telling us that it was thorough, it was great, never had training like this before. It was so much different than what we had before. What we really were running into a lot of times was ease of use. And that was because we were having problems with our Wi-Fi because of Spectrum. And it was kind of an unknown problem that we were having. And once we went to geofencing, that actually pretty much went away. So we saw a tremendous change in how people felt about training, approached training, and just the research from the surveys that we did. And we did close to about 150, so pretty good amount. The other thing is, when we talked about being able to audit, we had also at this point switched over from the Redbook to Zenput. So that was also a great choice.
Kaylee, you know what? I have an attendee who is wanting to ask a question, so I'm going to allow Andrew to just jump on and see what he has, what he'd like you to share. Andrew, go ahead. You just need to unmute yourself. Okay. I'm not hearing Andrew. Maybe we're having let me see if he's putting. Okay. Andrew, can you just type your question into the chat? That might be a little easier, and then I'm happy to ask Kaylee. In the meantime, I do have a question that did come in for you. So one of the questions that someone wanted to make sure that you touch on while you're talking is that this is a great success story. Is there anything that you thought was going to be a success but that didn't go over well? So whenever is the right time to get into that, please let us know what didn't work. Thanks.
Yeah. So originally so for instance, we weren't going to use Zenput. We were actually going to be using a different platform. So we actually had to pivot on that, which was fine, because that was also part of our project, because our project actually ended up entailing quite a bit. We had originally anticipated our training taking less than 2 hours to be a certified physician. Right now it's taking a little bit longer. It's about 2 hours and 15 minutes. So what we had anticipated did take longer. And then also when we ended up rolling it out, and we still are providing labor credit to the stores, there was pushback because the stores didn't understand how that labor credit was being implemented. And so they thought it was going to be added on after the fact. So it wasn't clearly communicated from the finance department to the ADs or area managers down to the operators. So they were getting some frustration because they thought they weren't getting something that they were told they were getting. And so we were kind of we were caught in between. So that was definitely one piece that we thought we had done everything, and then it kind of didn't turn out that way. We had best intentions and didn't quite turn out like that. Any others? I know I have 2 slides left.
Okay, why don't you go ahead, and then I have some other questions coming in, but we can hold those till the end.
So the last 2 were really just talking about return on investment. So right now we have about 1,500 we have over 1,500 hours in training. So we have been 100% in training since DevLearn last year. One of the interesting things is that, and I'm sure you guys all know, you implement something and then it just kind of fizzles out. This has not been that case. Part of it is that their scorecard or how they get bonuses is tied to this as well. So they are actually saying each store is usually about 92 to 95% done, which is amazing. We have some stores that are like 99% done. Right now we have 58 courses, 244 active lessons, 753 steps, 123 on-the-job tasks, and 744 documents in our resource library. Our resource library is one of the most used pieces. We actually have one document that's been viewed 160 times since it was uploaded on March 27th. And that document is only used by operators, rarely. So we do have a lot of material that's really been utilized. We currently have 12 training outlines for job titles. So someone gets hired at a specific job title or job change. And then we have 13 automation courses for different things for LTOs, or if someone gets hired at a specific job level. We also have started using the social, but we actually have not said anything, but it has started taking off organically. So during our last LTO, we just randomly threw in a poll question. We didn't say anything. It just was at the end. It was optional. We ended up getting 1,608 answers out of the 1,987 people that actually took the lesson. So just telling them that they're going to get points, they just start doing things for points. And then Skooks was kind enough to make this graphic for us, which I love because I use that picture all the time in my training. But for us, one of the amazing things have been these ROIs that we've been able to measure and really look at. So like I said, it is currently taking us about 2 hours and 15 minutes to certify. However, what we're hearing is it is faster for them now to become productive. And so what's being measured is it used to take about a week for someone to actually pick up the skills and be able to stay with our business because we're compressed into that small daytime. Our busy times are very busy. Now they're able to really get to work a lot faster. They complete their training on the tablet first thing, and then they go into position and they know things, which has just not been the case in the past if they've just jumped into place. We hear that all the time from our store managers. They are telling us they know it. They can come in and they can tell us how things are supposed to be done. They can remember recipes. They can find things. They're good. Another big one has been our turnover. We've actually had the lowest turnover during the implementation process that we've ever had. We have seen this really impact with our management. We're really focused on having an 80-20%. So we want to have 80% internal promotions, which has been a big push for us. So really outlining what an internal manager needs to do to be promoted. We know it costs about $5,000 for us to turn over a manager. So if we're able to push them internally through, so by being able to have the lowest turnover that we can is really important. When we started, we were at 173% for team member turnover, and we're currently at 111. And then we're also seeing just across the board, I mean, you can read all the others. We are just, our return on investments have just been amazing for us. So the feedback that we get from the field, to me, that is so great, but then also being able to actually see the numbers is great too.
Yes, I think that your organization has gone far beyond the typical how many completions, what was the satisfaction with the class, and
Yeah.
smiley face sheets that are kind of a long-standing minimum threshold of entry for data, and you're really able to show to your executive team, who then can use that information out in the market to investors. This is also valuable. So I'm so excited that your organization and other customers that we've been working closely with over the last few years are really moving in this direction. I do have some questions that have come in, and if anyone on the call has questions that you've thought of while we've been chatting, please go ahead and enter them in. But one of them is asking, is there any additional unexpected benefits that you've experienced? So something that you weren't expecting that came as a pleasant surprise?
One thing that we weren't really expecting, but kind of came up. So we were not really anticipating a strong correlation between our SMG, so our guest satisfaction, and Skooks' implementation. We knew that there was going to be some, but we've seen really high numbers with Skooks. And then also the very strong correlation with Skooks' input and our Stereotech self-audits and Stereotech evaluations that we have. So when we use Stereotech and they come around, those scores have become just so much better over time that we weren't expecting that to happen. We also weren't expecting the completion rates to stay as high as they are. We were kind of expecting them to fall and dip, because we had seen that with a couple of the new stores that we had opened. They had dipped down right after opening, and then it took a while for them to build back up. Once we did company-wide implementation, that didn't happen at all, which was shocking.
That's very positive to hear. And the last one I have for you, because we're running low on time and I want to make sure I'm respectful of everyone, and the next thing you have to go on to after this great session is is there any advice for you that you want to share? You've already shared it so much, all the pre-work that you did, all the testing that you did. Is there anything that you just want to give as some general advice to everyone out there who is at a point where they need to look at their tech stack, at the way they're doing things, are looking to move from paper to a system, or have a system that's just not meeting the needs? What advice would you give to someone that's got this journey ahead?
That planning phase, so that the time that we took to develop our career path matrix, to figure out every single thing we were going to need, that saved us so much time on the back end, and allowed us to really figure out what we were going to need, what we needed to gather, what we were going to end up needing to create. And especially when we were having to work with other departments, it gave them time to do things. So if we needed them to make a video with our CEO, Kathy Niven, it gave them time to actually schedule that out because she's very busy. So it gave them, you know, a 3-month window to get that done versus if we had just sprung it on them, that wouldn't have happened. But by taking the time to plan out exactly what that's going to look like is so important, and it still continues to be, because I can go back to that and find exactly where things live. So if I need to update something, I'm not going, well, where did I put the uniform guide and which lesson does that belong in? I can actually just go right back to that career path matrix. I can do Control F and I can find it in a minute, and I don't have to guess where it is.
And, you know, before we wrap up, I do want to say, you know, that's something I think probably really helped to make a huge difference from what I've seen over my years and working with customers and Skooks and other organizations, is the executive sponsorship and involvement of your leadership. I'm sure made a lot of difference to get things done more quickly, and to have that support. It probably helped to reduce resistance, or at least kept the resistance a little quiet.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Kathy has been amazing. Our whole LT team and our operations team, all of our area directors, they have just really been super supportive. Our LT team here has just embraced it, knowing that the return is going to be there. And then once we were able to complete our return on investment with Skooks, then we came back with numbers, and I think we were expecting like a 3% return. And it was well above that. They were like, okay. they were okay with it.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Tara, let me hand the mic back to you. Before we give up all the housekeeping, I do want to encourage everybody to take a moment and consider coming to our website. There's a great quick direct link to our Frontline Learning Development Playbook, and it includes some information about customers, in addition to Kaylee, who have gone through this journey and have really focused on the ROI and way to get to where you're really supporting the frontline workers and the business that benefits that you can get to your bottom line. So I hope that you'll all please go in and take a moment to download that. And Tara, take it away.
Thank you very much. No, there's really not much else to say, but thank you. And the recording will be on the website later.
Awesome.
See you guys
Thanks
back
for the
someday.
time, Tara and
Right.
Kaylee.
Thank you.
Bye.